In CLL, we've got a study at the University of Birmingham that we actually promoted a couple of weeks ago that many of you might be signed up for, and they'll be looking at antibody response and T-cell response. We've got Dr. Simon Stanworth, who is looking at this in people with AML. We've got Claire Harrison and Dragana Milochkovic, who are planning and looking at vaccine effectiveness in people with CML. We've got Dr. Beth Payne, and I think the SOAP study, which you might have seen results on last week, will look at something more specifically in people with MDS. We've got Claire Harrison looking at MPN. Of course, we've got Sian Lim and Emma looking at people with lymphoma, as Peter and Emma have just said. But we also have Andy Petit, who will focus specifically on vaccine effectiveness in people with follicular lymphoma. We've got 2 studies looking at people vaccine effectiveness in myeloma we're aware of. One is part of a study called Octave, and another one is called Prepare. And then we also have a study that will look at people who have received stem cell transplants or CAR T cell therapy specifically, and look at vaccine effectiveness in those people and when the most appropriate time is to vaccinate those people after transplant. And then, of course, we've got PEAT study, which is looking at people with aplastic anemia and PNH and other bone marrow failure disorders. So we do have quite a good spread. I appreciate that's a really top line description of them all, and we are putting together some more information on them all, but I want to reassure you that there are studies prepared and being planned in all disease types, and we're hoping kind of to support as many of them as possible, depending on how much funding we get.
Many people patients might be really keen to be part of these studies, and it may not be possible for all of you to be part of a study or to be recruited if it's not, for example, open in the centre that's treating you. But I'd like to reassure you that as Rachel's just described, the breadth of the studies that are being planned in the UK for patients with blood cancer means that we hope each study will have enough patients recruited to it that we will get really useful information for patients with all the main types of blood cancers and blood disorders on all the main types of treatments that we use in the UK, that we will be able to generate answers that will be relevant or applicable to you, even if you're not actually recruited to one of the studies.
People listening might be wondering why we're doing all these different studies. Why don't we just do one big one? Wouldn't that be easier? In practice, it's because we've needed to move very quickly to get the studies going. And that's sometimes easier to do at a relatively small scale. But the important point is that with the leadership from Blood Cancer UK, we're going to bring all the information together from these different studies that we're doing to make sure that the whole is bigger than the sum of the parts. So although there's lots of different things going on, these will all come together to make sure that we've got as reliable and as robust information as we possibly can. And I think that's a really important bit of leadership from Blood Cancer UK.
Absolutely. Thank you for shouting about us, Peter. That's a really important part of our work. So what we've been doing over the last couple of months is making sure that all of these studies are as aligned as possible. So when we have data, we can all feed them into one analysis and kind of compare and contrast them. And just to say that we've also been speaking to people internationally doing studies. So in the US, in Australia, in Israel, and the hope is that we'll be able to pull data from all those different studies and kind of increase our numbers and make that data and findings as significant as possible.